Eat, Sleep, Boxing, Repeat. Delighted to be joined by Greg, Paul, and Elliot for the Amir Khan versus Kell Brook big fight breakdown. The fight is happening in a couple of weeks now. It's not long to go at all, gents. As we know, it's been long awaited. We've been talking about this fight for 7, 8, 9, possibly 10 years. But yeah, it's very close now. So interested to get a range of your thoughts about the fight. Going to go straight into it. As I just mentioned there, we've been waiting for this fight for a long time. I think we'd all agree both fighters are well past their peak now. What I want to get your opinion on, maybe just not the most important point here, but if this fight had happened 5, 6, 7 years ago, or when both fighters were at their peaks, when both fighters were world champions a few years ago, how would this fight have turned out? We'll get on to official predictions in a little while, but want to get your opinion on that. Paul, going to go to you first. What would have happened?
I think it's a really interesting one because I genuinely do believe, even when they were both at their peaks, it was still difficult to call. And I know we were kind of discussing off camera there as well. It is still kind of like I don't have a clue who's going to win. I think the interesting point here is it's kind of feel like although they're the same age, they're both 35 now. I think their peaks were at a different time. Kind of, I think Khan peaked before Brook did. Obviously, you know, Brook, you'd say he was at his peak when he beat Porter, up until the Golovkin defeat. Whereas Khan, you say he was probably at his peak a few years before that. So judging off that, it's one of those ones where it's like, could Khan sustain the hand speed and the accuracy for 12 rounds without getting caught by Brook? Because you know, we do know he's not just a puncher, Brook, but he was a bigger puncher than Khan and had a reputation at the time for being quite a big puncher as well. And I think if I had to pick, and you were forcing me to pick someone at their peaks, I probably would edge towards Khan.
Interesting. Okay, interesting breakdown. Yeah, interesting breakdown there, Paul. Thanks for that. Greg, going to go to you next, mate. Do you agree with Paul? Would you steer towards Khan if it was peak against peak, or would you go more towards Brook?
Strange. I really agree with Paul. I agree with everything that he's saying, but I've got a weird logic to this fight, and I always have. I think Khan is 10 times the fighter Kell Brook is. Always has been, always will be. Much more talented, much more in his arsenal. But and this is where the but is. Mentality-wise, I think whenever this fight happens, I think Khan just gets drawn in with him. And I think that's always going to be his downfall. I think some fights you get where guys are clearly better than other guys, but that doesn't mean that they always win, because it depends on mentality, when the fight takes place. And I've always just seen Khan absolutely schooling him by getting stopped. Always seen it, always had it in my head since the beginning. It's different slightly now because both of them are quite short. It's who's got more left. But yeah, I think in their peaks, I've always thought Khan is a much better fighter than Kell Brook. But I think mentality-wise, he just gets drawn in and stopped earlier.
Interesting. Yeah, interesting. Again, I think as kind of both of you have said, it's not an easy call to make now or 5 years ago or 7 or 8 years ago. It's really tough. It's a really tough question. Elliot, gonna come to you as well. What are your thoughts?
I'm not just. I mean, people who have seen us sparring, I suppose, in other videos will attest that me and Paul occasionally differ in our opinions, and I'm not just differing here solely to keep up that habit. But what I would say is that I agree with everything you're saying with regards to the timings of the peaks. I mean, if you look at some of the names on Khan's record, for example, like I was looking at it earlier, just ridiculous. You know, like in 2 waves, you got obviously. I mean, I know obviously Barrera was old when he fought him, and you know, Kotelnik, Salita, Malinaji, Maidana, Tabjuda's on there again, an older version. Loses to Garcia, goes on that pre-Canelo run of Diaz, Collazo, Alexander, Algieri. And you're looking at those names and thinking, right, that's obviously a credible CV. When you look at Kell Brook, you're looking at it going, Sean Porter and Frankie Gavin. Probably Frankie Gavin only really is a promise, you know, rather than an actual credible opponent. So you're looking at it that way and you're going, I mean, your head has to say that Khan probably would have too much for him. But I actually agree with Greg. I've always thought intuitively that if they actually did fight, I think Kell Brook would beat him. Don't know why. there's just something about it. And I always think, again, you look at it and you think, why wouldn't Khan take that fight when it was a massive fight previously if he thought he'd just walk through him and beat him? And I just think there was always that suspicion of, like Paul said as well, Brook's power essentially just getting to him eventually. So I actually, peak versus peak, would have gone with my heart and basically said I think Brook would have beaten him, probably by KO.
Okay, no, really interesting. We got Brook 2, Khan 1 there. That's really interesting thoughts. Looking forward to hearing your predictions for the fight happening in 2021 shortly. Also interested to talk about the training setup here. Kell Brook has kind of gone to and from the Ingle gym in recent years. It feels like he had a different trainer for the Terence Crawford fight. I believe he had a different trainer for a fight he had in Sheffield 3 or 4 years ago. I think it was that one fight he had at light middleweight. Back with Dominic Ingle now, was back with him at the press conference. We all know about the Ingle gym, about Dominic Ingle, Brendan Ingle. Amir Khan, on the other hand, got a new trainer for this fight, training with Brian McIntyre, who, of course, trains Terence Crawford. He's actually training with Terence Crawford. I believe Crawford's going to be travelling to the UK to support when he can on fight week as well. I think it feels like those two, despite being former opponents, have kind of become friends and training partners as well. But yeah, Greg, I'll go to you first on this one. Just kind of wanted to get your general thoughts, mate. One on Kell Brook kind of switching with Dominic Ingle on and off for the last few years, and Amir Khan kind of going with Brian McIntyre and going straight into a tough fight against Kell Brook in his first fight with his new trainer.
Yeah, it's interesting, Elliot. There's a lot of talking points there. Now, did any of you guys happen to see the interview that I think was it with Sky Sports that Kell Brook done lately, past week or two? It lasted about 5 minutes, and he mentioned Khan's training regime and changing trainers. Is Kell Brook forgetting that Dominic Ingle refused to train him because he thought he was finished? Nobody's thinking about that, are they? He's going, oh, he's jumping to trainers, he's doing this, he's doing that. Well, your trainer refused to train you going forward based on decisions that you were making because he didn't think you had it anymore. So that's interesting. If you look at that for a start, it winds me up sometimes, Brook, he really does. I understand why he's went to Brian McIntyre. Brian McIntyre trains Bud Crawford, is that right? He's arguably went to the guy who's training the best pound for pound fighter in the world in some people's eyes. So yeah, that's what it is. I get that you've got to build relationships and get an understanding of coaches and things, but sometimes it can make you sharp there as well. If you go to someone new because you're dying to impress them and you know that they've proven themselves to be a world-class fighter. So I'm not reading too much in it. I think it's a bit, I don't want to be like an anticlimax on the fight, but I think the two of them are cashing in. And I think they're trying to make the best of a bad situation. So, I'm not looking too much into the training things because I think it's just going to come down to who's a better man tonight, especially at the age and the time when this fight's happened.
And do you think the fact that obviously, although Kell Brook's not been with Dominic Ingle for some of his recent fights, he's obviously been in the Ingle gym since he was a child. He's known Dominic Ingle for a long time. Dominic Ingle knows him very well, whereas Amir Khan has only had a couple of months with Brian McIntyre. Do you think that could have any sort of impact?
It could have a more positive impact for Brook because he's with somebody that's always been used to him and taking everything else away that I've just said. So I think it can have an impact based on Dominic Ingle will know him, but I also think Dominic Ingle would not be one bit scared to pull him out of a fight if he wanted to. I mean, let's not forget, Brook's eye socket was decimated by Golovkin. Is that going to play a part? Is Dominic Ingle going to be thinking about that in the corner if he's taking a lot of shots and there's bad swelling to the eye? I don't know, man. There's a lot. I'm not anti-climaxing the fight because I think it's possibly more interesting now than it's ever been, this fight, but for all the wrong reasons. So, yeah, I think it probably favours Brook, the training schedule and everything, but not by a lot because there's a lot of things there with Brook as well that are not been mentioned until I've mentioned them now. Absolutely.
Cool. So, Elliot, going to go to you next. Do you agree with what Greg's saying? Do you think that the Ingle Brook relationship could have a positive impact on on Brook's chance of winning the fight. What are your thoughts on Khan's situation as well?
Yeah, no, I do fully agree with Greg, to be honest. I don't think it's anti-climaxing it to say that they're kind of cashing in. I think when I look at it, you sort of look what he was saying about Ingle and Brook's relationship there, and obviously him essentially refusing to train Brook for Crawford. You're looking at that as a massive red flag, essentially. And then when he comes back, you're thinking, why would you come back? It's that training relationship. You're looking at going, well, probably there's an element of nostalgia, probably like that one last ride together sort of thing. And I think for Kell, it is nice actually to have him back there, though. I think that's kind of what's necessary and what's needed. I don't look too much into the Khan thing. So I remember there was a big buzz, wasn't there, when he went over to like work with Virgil Hunter as well. And you're looking at that and you're going, well, that didn't really yield the significant results that it was essentially supposed to. I think obviously Khan's best years were with Freddie Roach. And I look at him training with like Crawford and that now, and I think, well, to be honest with you, like they've obviously fought relatively recently and it was a golfing class. I'm looking at it going, okay, you might be getting some decent sparring, but you're not stretching Crawford, are you? Like in any which way? Like I kind of see it as more just Crawford will be fighting down really in preparing Khan for this. So I kind of see it more as like a business relationship. Okay, it might raise Crawford's profile over here to have that kind of media involvement with Amir Khan. To a casual fan, but I really don't see it making a huge amount of difference at the age he's at, the skills that he obviously relies upon, whether they're still there, whether they're degraded to the point where, you can't necessarily bring that speed back. So with Greg as well, I kind of think the familiarity of Ingle will actually assist Brook more than the kind of new training relationship that Amir Khan's got. But again, I don't read too much into it. I kind of think it will just come down essentially to who's got the most left and the sort of learned motor skills on the night, and who can roll back the years, as it were, to get the victory. So yeah, I don't read too much into it either.
Cool. Good stuff. Paul, just gonna come to you as well. What are your thoughts on the training situation?
Yeah, I can't really disagree with what the guys are saying. I completely echo what their thoughts are, because although what Greg said about Ingle, refusing to train him, that's very interesting. I think a lot of people will have forgotten about that until they've watched this. Maybe one of them I'd completely forgotten about that as well, and that's kind of not changed my mind on anything, but because I did originally have Khan to win, but it's very, very interesting point. However, on the flip side of that, I do think Ingle is probably the one coach who can get the best out of Kell Brook at this stage of his career, just from, like Elliot said, the familiarity that they've had. They've trained together for years, and I do think that if Brook is going to get the best out, if someone is going to get the best out of Brook, it is going to be Dominic Ingle. And with Khan, it's one of them where he's been with Virgil Hunter, Freddie Roach, wasn't he with Joe Goosen as well for a bit? I just kind of look at it now and think, what more is he going to learn at this age? It's also a matter of what more will he want to learn? Is he open to listening? Does Khan think he maybe knows there's nothing he can be taught? All these factors. I do think, don't get me wrong, Brian McIntyre is obviously a fantastic coach, fantastic trainer, worked wonders with Terence Crawford, but like Elliot said, in sparring, he's going to have good sparring, but it's Amir Khan is well past it. So what more can Brian McIntyre bring to the table? I'm not so sure. But then again, obviously McIntyre seems to be singing Khan's praises from what I've seen in the few clips that I've seen him do interviews of. So I don't think the training situation is massive. But it's obviously, you do need to talk about it, and it is interesting.
Yeah. Cool. Interested to get your thoughts on that, gents. I think there's lots of things to consider. I think the fact it's Amir Khan's first fight under his new trainer, but he's had a few trainers in his career. And kind of what's gonna, if something happens with Brook Sai or he's taking too many shots, will Dominic Ingle throw the towel in again? I think it's very interesting. I think it's interesting if things heat up between the two trainers on fight week as well. Cool. We move on. So as we mentioned here, I think both fighters are 35 now. Have been pros for over 15 years. I think kind of coming up to 20 years really. What do you guys think that there's a good chance that both fighters will retire? And if you don't think that, what do you think what fights are there for the winner? And do you think there's still demand to see them? I know that Kell Brook did an interview a couple of days ago where he mentioned possibly fighting Keith Thurman later in the year. If Keith Thurman wins his fight in a couple of weeks. But yeah, what are your fights? What do you think is going to happen? What would you want to see? I'm going to go with Elliot first on this one.
Okay, so I think what they should both retire. I think is first and foremost what I kind of think about this. I think it's a cash out fight. Okay, you kind of cross the T's, dot the I's, whatever. You have it on the legacy, even though it's like the Mayweather Pacquiao. You've done it, even though it wasn't what it was when it could have been what it was. So people won't flog you for it in 15 years that you never fought each other. So they both should retire. But I think if Brook wins, they both will retire. I think Amir Khan will retire irrespective of what happens. I don't think it really damages his legacy significantly if he loses to Brook now, with the age factor and the decline in the miles on the clock that he's got on the fights that he's had. You can look back at his legacy and go and be proud of essentially what he accomplished. I always feel that Kell Brook, though, due to a mixture of kind of, I don't know whether it's poor promotion or whatever it is, getting thrown in with Golovkin, I always feel like he never had the big fights that he wanted to have. Well, he's obviously fought Spence, he's fought Crawford, but he hasn't won those fights either. So he's already got the kind of Porter as the kind of high watermark of his career. So I still feel there's like with Kell, there's unfinished business. So I wouldn't be surprised either way if he carried on or tried to carry on for a bit. I think market for a fight, I think, to be honest with you, Thurman's obviously had his injury problems and his issues as well. So it might be a similar shade of product to throw him in with Keith Thurman again, in the sense of what's either of them got left. I wouldn't really like to see it, to be perfectly honest. I think Brook would lose that as well. I wouldn't like to see Kell. I mean, there's been talk of Kell even fighting, or the winner even fighting kind of young upcoming stars like Conor Benn, for example. Wouldn't want to see that either. Don't think it does anything for Ben or for Brook. So I would like to see them both retire, but equally I wouldn't be surprised if Kell Brook tried to carry on. But with injuries he's had, I don't think he should. And I feel, in some ways, I don't know, that's the wrong word, I think, to say sorry for him, because it's obviously he's had a successful career to a degree. He's obviously earned money out of boxing, but at the same time you look at it and you go, for someone of his talent, British fighter of his talent of the last sort of 15, 20 years, should have been managed a lot better, should never have been thrown in with Golovkin, and really could have had a much better stellar career than what he's had.
Yeah, and I think Brook's quite honest about that now. I think he admits that fighting Golovkin probably wasn't the best move, the best idea. Maybe it was at the time, but I think he's quite honest about that now. Yeah, I think Paul, same question. Do you agree with what Elliot's saying? Do you think there's a good chance both will retire? What do you think is going to happen afterwards?
Yeah, 100%, and I hope they both do. Funny what Elliot said, I do completely agree with in terms of whether Amir Khan wins or loses. I think he'll retire. I think he knows his days are done. Whereas with Brook, I can completely see what Elliot's saying, where, especially, if he loses, I think he'll retire. But say he does win, when he gets a nice knockout, for example, he'll be thinking, oh, hold on, there's still a little bit left in the tank. But then my worry about that is the Thurman fight. Does he have that at 147? Because I don't want to see him fight at 147. But I also don't want to see him fight at 154, because if he fights at 154, fellas are a lot bigger than him. And if he is going to fight someone that's young, hungry, up and coming, he's going to get iced, in my opinion. And if he beats Amir Khan and somehow thinks in his head that, I could maybe have another shot at the world titles. Well, who's the champions at 154? Charlo and Castano. Come on. He's never going to win another title or be anywhere near it. So I don't really see the point, the benefit of Kell Brook continuing. But I think it's maybe just a pride thing with him, and also what Elliot said about, do you know what? I deserve another big fight or two, because I've kind of been deprived of them in my career because of the Golovkin defeat and the Spence defeat and the eye injuries. But I just really hope that both men hang the gloves up after.
Yeah, I feel like both men have achieved a lot in the sport, and there's maybe nothing else left to do, but we'll have to see. I think, Greg, going to come to you finally. Do you agree with Elliot and Paul? Do you think both will retire, or do you think there's a chance that one of them or both of them will fight on afterwards?
Both points that the guys made there, I don't feel like I can add to it. That's exactly what I think. Just some things jump out at me. I think if Brook stops Khan in dramatic fashion in the first 6 rounds, he'll fight on. If it's a close fight, that Brook doesn't look good in at all and stops Can late, I think they'll retire. I think Can will retire no matter what. But just listening to some of the guys' thoughts there, I know it's a little bit off topic, but there's some things that jump out at me. I don't know if it was one of the Smith brothers or not, but I've heard a few people saying, see, at 154, Kell Brook would have been one of this country's greatest ever fighters. He was supposed to be unbelievable at 154. It was getting that last £7. It killed him every time.
Yeah.
What a waste. Honestly, what a waste. Like, he should have went up to 154 after Golovkin, or even before Golovkin. But yeah, keep on track and answer the question, Elliot. I think both will retire, but if Brook wins, it will depend how he wins, if he goes on or not.
Yeah.
And to answer it, he'll do nothing and win nothing either.
No, I agree. I think.
Sorry, bit harsh, but it's
I think you're being honest. I think one thing on your point that I've always thought, if there was a weight division in the middle of welterweight and super welterweight, that would have been really good for Brook, and I think he would have accomplished great things. But we can't make up weight divisions. We're not we're not in that position. Cool. Yeah. So final question, guys. Been really interested to get your thoughts on this one. I feel like could probably speak for a lot longer and discuss a lot more. I want a quick fire 30-second prediction from all of you. I know it's a tough one, but I'm going to ask you for a prediction. Greg, I'm going to go to you first.
This
is your prediction now. Your prediction close to the fight could be different. Your prediction before the first bell goes could be different. What are your thoughts now? Who are you swaying towards?
Guys, this is when you know someone knows you. Elliot knows that in fight week I can change my mind based on what happens. So thank you for that. I've got to be honest, I will have my Amir Khan t-shirt on. I will be so pro Amir Khan to win this fight. I'm saying that right now, but I just see him getting stopped. Whether he's ahead or it's a close fight, I think Khan he gets too emotionally involved, and I see him at this moment in time. I see Brook stopping him, unfortunately.
Okay. Elliot, thoughts?
I agree with Greg. Straight up, I think Brook's going to stop him. I'm basing that decision on kind of recent activity and what we saw from Amir Khan against Bud Crawford. I think he's done. I think he's finished. I think he knows he's finished. I think this is just a pure money grab. And whereas I think, Brook's more motivated to actually prove something. And I think, on the night he'll stop him.
2-0 to Brook. Paul, are you going to make it 2-1? You're going to make it a clean sweep for Kell Brook?
2-1. I'm going to go with Amir Khan. I think what you said there about the Khan that fought Crawford, I think arguably Kell Brook's performance was just as bad. So I can see Khan. I do agree with what the guys are saying, though. I think it's completely inevitable that Khan's going to get caught by Brook at some stage. So I think he'll get dropped. But I'm going to go with a Khan points decision off the canvas 1 or 2 times. Mm-hmm. Let's go.
Very specific.
I hope Paul's right.
Yeah, I hope he's right.
That sounds really exciting. Okay, so we're going for Kell Brook 2, Amir Khan 1. These, just to confirm, these aren't final predictions. I think Brook is the bookie's favourite here, so I think perhaps that's where most people are leaning towards. Cool. I think that's it, gents.
Elliot, you're not getting off with it.
No. Okay. You know what? This time I'm happy to give a prediction. I'm going for Kell Brook as well. I think that one point is Amir Khan has had, I think, is it one fight in 2.5 years, and that was against Billy Dibb.
I think it was April 2019 or something, or July 2019.
Yeah. So, and before that he fought Crawford. So I think that plays an impact as well. I know Crawford's not been super active, but he's been more active. He's been more active than that. Mm-hmm. I think Kell Brook's a bit hungrier at this time of his career, not literally, but So I'm leaning to I'm going for Kell Brook, probably by stoppage. But as I mentioned off camera, unfortunately, I think it could be quite a sad affair when a couple of rounds in we realise how far past both peaks there are, and we could be talking more about that and what would have happened 5-6 years ago than what's actually happening in 2021. Except that wasn't a 30-second breakdown. I've gone against my own rule, so apologies.
Sorry, I put you on the spot.
That's my prediction. I'm going for Kell Brook as well. But yeah, just excited that we're finally going to get to see after all these years. Hopefully, it's going to be a good fight. Cool. I think that's it, gents. Thanks very much for your time this afternoon. And yeah, we are looking forward finally to Amir Khan versus Kell Brook. Thanks very much.
Thank you
very much, mate. Thank you.
Guys.